Urban One Incorporated, Radio One, or any of its subsidiary companies. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining our show. We have our superstar panel, Milton Grime, who represented Rodney King, who I thought was one of the top trial lawyers on the planet for generation after generation, ushered into accountability for police misconduct, which is a rarity even today. And then we have Marlon Primes, who worked for the Department of Justice, an expert on federal laws and rules and things like that. So we're just very low today. There are so many fascinating things that are occurring in our legal system. But I want to also thank all those jurors who rendered a multi-million-dollar verdict for my client. Thank you very much for the people that listen in. And of course, we have trials scheduled about every month. So hopefully we see you again. Now, having said that, there were so many fascinating cases, Milton and Marlon, but the one that stuck out to me, believe it or not, was this dumb case in DC involving the former Olympian indicted for felony for allegedly vandalizing the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool in Washington. Now, Milton, Marlon, so what was their evidence of this misconduct, this egregious crime, allegedly? Nothing. They had no evidence. They go and say, show us evidence. Oh, we don't have any. Gotta be the dumbest indictment I've ever seen. But maybe that's not true, because the Jim Coleman indictment was just as egregious. I don't know. Did you guys follow that story?
Yes, good morning. This is really a travesty. One of the things that the Department of Justice has enjoyed, and, Milton can probably speak to this question, is that the federal judiciary, had such confidence in the word of the Department of Justice and their attorneys that there was a presumption of regularity. And what we're kind of seeing, and that basically means that there's a presumption that, hey, you're going to be above board, you're going to be honest, things of that sort. And we're seeing an erosion of that because of cases like this. Now we're seeing indictments tossed, and judges sanctioning Department of Justice attorneys. So it certainly is very troublesome. So we'll kind of see how this case progresses. But your audience should know, Nathaniel, that in terms of criminal law, it's different from civil law. Civil law, it's basically more likely than not criminal law, guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's a higher burden of proof, and you have to intend to engage in criminal behavior. And so to have an indictment because someone goes to the reflecting pool that the president spent a lot of time, marketing. In fact, he, went to the pool and, made some very negative comments about a African-American reporter at ABC News who just raised some legitimate questions about it. So he was invested. So when it showed that there were faulty repairs in terms of the paint job and the workmanship, and someone, this Olympic, former Olympian, comes in and just basically grabs a piece of debris that's already floating, and then you make an allegation that is criminal behavior, intentional criminal behavior, is very troubling. So it will be interesting to see if this case follows the cases that courts have been very critical of the Department of Justice, and there's a dismissal or sanctions. But it certainly is a sad day that we went away from thoroughly investigating the cases, having senior people that can criticize. And I think you get a better result. And certainly the Department of Justice was never perfect, but certainly this is another new low in my view.
Yeah.
You're
Here's
struggling
my
to
concern.
explain another man's misconduct, and it, something I can't do very well.
Yeah, I don't get it, but here's what, from an ethical standpoint, uh, these charges, once they're dismissed, I think that the lawyer can be held liable for violating our professional code because, I think it's 3.4. There's certain specific rules that govern that you have to be truthful to the tribunal or the court, right? And so when you file bogus criminal charges that are bogus, I think that no reasonable attorney could conclude that this is a violation of the criminal code. And then it turns out, of course, that the present motorcade is the one that caused the damage by driving through this pool before the paint and stuff would dry properly. So it's kind of a goofy type thing. And they filed criminal charges to garner widespread publicity for the MAGA Republican type. And so it is a travesty when the American justice system turns upside down to accommodate these illegal and inappropriate thought process of one person. So I think it's a sad day. But the Justice Department has made a radical turn over the last few years that I've never seen before. I thought the lawyers I dealt with in my career from the Justice Department was all top notch. For the most part, they tried to be fair. We got in some intense debates from time to time. I sued the government in civil cases, and the cases all got resolved over the last 3 or 4 decades. But what I'm seeing now is so far off base. And he'd also talked about the Jim Coleman indictment, Milton, earlier. And, in terms of evidence, seashells that form a number somehow is a crime and a threat on someone's life. I mean, it was just bizarre to me.
Well, the thing is that your listeners should understand is that, and I think it not only goes for law, but other professions as well, is that you have to look yourself in the mirror. And someone asks you to do something that is wrong. There's always going to be consequences. We're seeing lawyers at DOJ being sanctioned, being referred to bar associations where they could have their license revoked or suspended. You really have to make this independent assessment as to whether or not you're doing the right thing. And as lawyers, as you all know, when you sign a pleading, you have to comply with Rule 11, indicating that there's a good faith basis in terms of what you're saying to the court. You have to be accurate in your representations. So it's a teachable moment, to those in your audience, Nathaniel, that you have to make sure that, you live up to, ethical standards, because it's gonna come back and bite you. And when it comes back and bite you, sometimes you're going to be there alone. They're not going to say, hey, it's not going to be a defense that, hey, the president or someone in higher up in the administration told me to do it. It's going to be, hey, why did you engage in this behavior?
Well,
the politician that passed last week.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Politician that passed from South Carolina last week. His name escapes me.
Lindsey Graham.
Lindsey Graham. When Lindsey Graham was running against Trump in 2016, and he called him every word in the book about his dishonesty and his sexism, et cetera, and he couldn't be trusted, and turned around a week later or so, to speak, and said he was an honorable man and he was this and he's that, and has supported him for the last, how many years? 8 years or so?
Yes.
Something is happening in our political system that is, I don't know if it's new or not, but it's obvious this man has some power and control over people to get what he wants. And he's turning.
To get for a contract ain't enough. They want 100%. So that less than 1% is now been eliminated. And what was surprising to me, Milton, Marlon, is that the local reaction to our political leaders was silent. So we seen right before our eyes the abrogation of rights of minority who are taxpayers in our city and state being excluded from the process. And I didn't see the outrage. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I spending my time and money to help elect these wannabe politicians? And when we have issues that are this important to our community, they're totally silent.
You know, we haven't talked about this project. What was it, 2025? Back 2 years ago, we were talking about what they were going to do and what they said they were going to do. And we're seeing it. They're doing it. Everything they want to do. Wasn't it Project 2025 that we were so afraid of?
Yes. And, and according to the architects, a good part of it has been implemented, and now they're on to the next project. So, I think the thing too, to go to Nathaniel's, point about, not seeing the collective outrage, I mean, the response has to be planning. And, what is our plan and putting that together. And so it is troubling that, we're not, seeing as much organized pushback, to address these very, very important issues, because I think the problem is going to be if people on the street do not feel as though there's going to be a pushback or there's a counter weight against what's happening, they're going to vote with their feet and vote the couch. And that only makes, our democracy even more imperiled.
Someone was telling me last night at an affair that I was at that Elon Musk said he's going to give, got the name of the actor, $100 million to remake the movie Odyssey that I'm hoping to see tomorrow morning with my daughter, because they portray a character in there as dark-skinned, and she's too dark for that period of time. And that, have you heard about that?
No.
Oh yeah. That he's offended by that this person of dark skin is portraying a character in a movie that was supposed to be about Greece, rather, and he can't accept that.
Well, a lot of it's misinformation. I mean, anyone that is educated, understands that, Egypt and Africa, I mean, these were some of the places that had the first university. You have the largest earthworks, the Benin Empire, that was basically burnt down by the British in the late 1890s. You have a university in what's known as modern day Mali, Timbuktu, while European countries did not have similar universities. Scholars from all over the region went there. So a lot of it is miseducation and ignorance. Because if you really look at some of these famous Greek philosophers, Aristotle, what they indicated in their own writings is that they talked about the importance of African society and that Africans were black and dark. So, a lot of it is ignorance. And I think what we have to do is start educating. One of the things I was really impressed with, and maybe it might be your local churches, that a number of local churches around the country are doing what's known as freedom schools, where they're actually, being proactive and educating the young people about these important aspects of Black history, so that they're equipped when, there's comments made by Elon Musk and others, they can counteract that with facts. I mean, we have to really educate people. Hey, the Arabs, our Arab brothers and sisters, they came to Egypt in the 7th century. The pyramids were thousands of years old by that time.
Yes.
Sudanese, the Nubians, they controlled Egypt for 100 years. And they built a number of the pyramids. And there's more pyramids in Sudan than in Egypt. So, a lot of this information just is not, unfortunately, spread out to our communities to really, fight this ignorance that we're seeing from Elon Musk and others.
Hey, Moulton, our producer pointed out that Zendaya is cast in the role of Helen of Troy. And so the issue that you were talking about. But speaking of Elon Musk, that SpaceX, those shares have fallen like a rock in the ocean. So they're down, over 50%. And I didn't see why people thought that was such a hot stock. There was nothing to support the valuation that people were paying, nothing. and now the stock value has sunk so much. And so I assume that people made a substantial amount of money on this substantial stock decline,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
But the other issue that was a hot news story, a good friend out of New York, Mandami supporter, I thought that he had overstepped his bound, counsel, when he was talking about arresting the prime minister or the president of a foreign country for coming in the country. Netanyahu, who has been identified as a war criminal. He had boldly stated that he wanted to have him arrested when he came to New York. And I don't know a lot about international law, but I do know that there's something called immunity for foreign dignitaries and things like that. And I've not seen any evidence in my career where foreign dignitaries or ambassadors or officials have been arrested in on U.S. soil. I mean, I don't know. Did you guys follow that story?
I saw it briefly in the paper a couple of days ago, Nate, but I haven't followed it. But I'm not
Yeah.
surprised that the U.S. arresting whom they want to, where they want to, at any time they want to. I had a murder case dealing with the killing of a Joliet, Illinois police officer some years ago, and they went to Monterrey, Mexico. The federales did, and arrested my client who had fled to Monterrey. They did not take him to any tribunal, any court until they got him back in Joliet, Illinois. They hooked up with the federales back there. They violated all of his constitutional rights to come back to America to face the death penalty. And it went through the Illinois court like, that's nothing to be paid attention to. It's a law that is not always enforced, the international treaty dealing with where you can arrest someone and what you can arrest them for, from my experience.
Right. Now, the International Criminal Court, the U.S., the United States, and Israel are not, signees to that convention. But I think it's important for your audience to recognize that, yeah, there is something called diplomatic immunity. And what that basically means is that, you know, if a president of a foreign country comes to the United Nations, they're not going to arrest them. They're going to be immune from, prosecution. And that's to make sure that people feel free to come and participate in United Nations activities. So I think that's true. But I do think there hasn't been enough attention paid to the independent, determinations that there's something going really wrong in Gaza. I mean, you've basically had a United Nations report that indicated that children, and these are a group of experts, that children were being intentionally targeted and killed. That there was, intentional starvation and preventing aid from coming in. That they were, attacking hospitals. And then we have a number of journalists that have been killed. It's well over 200. Then you have United Nations workers, peacekeepers are there that are killed. So there's something terribly wrong. And I think the mayor was, right to speak out about it because there hasn't been a lot of people that have done so. And I think we have to, be of the mindset that wrong is wrong. And, and I think the last thing I'll say on this point is that President Obama, when he negotiated the peace treaty with Iran, before he left office, Netanyahu came and took the unprecedented step of coming to Congress and criticizing President Obama in a speech before the House and Senate. And President Obama retorted, as well as Rahm Emanuel, who's his chief of staff, and said, hey, look, here's where you're headed. Here's where public opinion is headed against you. Are you going to have an apartheid state? hey, this is the only solution, but for what? What are your alternatives? And they never could answer that question. So a lot of what's going on in terms of decline in support were things that President Obama really, had the candid conversation with Israel about. So it's unfortunate that we have a right-wing government that really is not paying attention to these international norms. And it shouldn't be necessary for Mayor Mondami to speak out, but I think he was appropriate in doing so because your audience should look at the slew of independent agencies that have made the same determination that there's a problem here.
Well, I thought our country itself engaged in war crimes when we start bombing fishing boats down in Venezuela. I just thought what they were doing was illegal. I'm not an international law expert, but I do know the fact that you can't go out and start bombing and killing people. If you suspect they're drug dealing, we have something in the United States called due process of law. So you don't go out and murder people first and then determine. And by the way, they never produce any evidence to show these gentlemen that they murdered committed a crime. If they did commit a crime, they're entitled to that they're in court, not to murder them and bomb them at sea. So
do you expect our president to be held accountable for this, Mr. Lee?
Well, I think that the American justice system is held for a long time. Eventually, they make mistakes, but we come back and we correct most mistakes. I believe that at some point in time that these folks who are executing unlawful orders will be held accountable. I sincerely believe that. I think that eventually the arch of justice will hold these military people, the so-called Secretary of Defense. I think they'll be held liable at some point in time.
I read a book a couple of years ago, The Indictment of Robert E. Lee, and about him being brought to justice for being a traitor against the United States during the Civil War. And one part that stood out to me was Grant, who was a general in the Union Army, stepped back and said, if he is indicted and goes to court, I will resign from the U.S. Army. I will submit my resignation. I will not represent this country. Because they had all gone to West Point together, and they were all buddies. And so there's that old boys connection, that old boys school throughout our political institutions today, where Trump seems to be taking full advantage of and does what he wants to do. And they don't get held accountable. So good luck.
Yeah.
Well, history is going to be the great judge. I mean, I think, our Israeli, brothers and sisters have to recognize that there's going to be a point in time where there are going to be pictures of more pictures than are out there now. And then what? So I think they have to think about it. And that as President Obama, correctly, prophesied, hey, you're pushing yourself more and more to isolation. And it's unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate.
Doesn't seem like they're thinking about it, though, with the bombing of civilian places intentionally, that's automatically a crime. Shouldn't.
It should be, but you got to remember that people that are in the Likud government, you have some extreme people. I mean, look at your audience should look at, Smoltrich and some of the people in their cabinet are just saying, outright racist things about our Arab brothers and sisters. And there's no accountability. So there's just extremism, and no pushback. So it's very disappointing. And, there were more moderate forces, and Netanyahu came to power opposing those moderate forces that were in Israel. They were looking to this two-state solution, which, is still part of officially U.S. policy. And it seems as though we're just kind of pushing that aside, unfortunately. So it will be really interesting to see how things, progress. But hopefully our prayers are, with those in the Middle East, and hopefully there'll be eventually some peace or peaceful solution. And there'll be adults in the room that will be able to resolve the case.
Well, here's the problem that I see. I think that there's a misnomer that when people are dealing with these political issues, that they're confusing the adverse leadership versus the population. Like in America, for example, I doubt you found very few Americans who dislike Canadians. They're great neighbors, and they're generally well-respected, nice neighbors, and a few of which I call as friends over the years. On the other hand, the same thing with Israeli. A lot of my Jewish friends. But then in the United States, we have this current administration that goes out and start wars, that murders people indiscriminately, of which probably the majority of people in the country disagree with. And so I think that we have to be careful, because when we're characterizing the country versus the obnoxious, illegal behavior of certain people in power, because in the United States, this power is transitory. It's every 4 years now, every 2 years, based on what happened in the House and the Senate. If we see a blue wave hit this fall and we regain control of the House, not just by a thin majority, by a wide enough majority to steamroll legislation, and retake the Senate, where we can get 53 votes in the Senate, because we're going to need it with the idiot guy out of Pennsylvania. And so we did that, then we could somehow course correct some of the adverse things that we've seen occurring during this current administration. Now, one of the things that is very important to the everyday consumer is things such as prices, gas prices. We're seeing right now, Milton, Marlon, a slowdown in real estate sales. And the reason being is that gas prices, coupled with high interest rate, act as a deterrent for home buying in our country, right? If you have to pay an extra, $100 a month to put gas in your car, that takes away your ability to pay another bill. It's just basic math. And what we're doing here in Indiana, I don't know about your state in California, Milton, or people in New York, we subsidize the gas prices now by suspending the gas tax, which I think is about 90 cents a gallon or so. So our gas prices in Indiana dip below $4 a gallon only because the suspension of the gas tax, right? But here's the problem that we're dealing with. Here locally, you can't drive your car anywhere on our city streets and not get flat tires now. We got potholes everywhere because now Indianapolis don't get enough money to fix their roads, and I'm not sure about what's going on in your city, but here we have Pierre pulling. Pierre, you got a question or comment for us today?
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Pierre. Please let the old man speak before I forget what I was going to say. But as Nate was talking, I'm thinking, recently, this week, there's a headline about someone want to initiate speaking English only in this country. That's on the platform out there, speaking English only. We don't have the checks and balance system that I thought we had. Maybe I'm naive, but I thought we had a check and balance system where the president could only do so much and Congress would intercede, and this is the authority here, and this is the authority here. And there seemed to be some indication of it, but it's not a very effective one, because this man is going overboard. So that's why I mentioned Lindsey Graham earlier, when he was 8 years or so ago, so vehemently against Trump, and about how this man had no principles and he was dishonest and he told lies every other breath. We seem to have accepted all of this, Nathaniel. We're letting it roll on. We're not stopping it with a check and balance system that is effective. Yes, Marlon, we take some cases to court one at a time, but it doesn't seem as though what's in place through our planned civilization is being utilized here in this case, in this time. So I give it to y'all. Y'all smarter than I am. I don't know what to be done.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Pierre.
Oh, good morning, Attorneys Lee, Primes, and Milton. I had two issues. One, I want to talk about the shooting in Wisconsin where the police had the guy down, the bicyclist down, and they shot him in the head, I think 3 times. But first of all, I want to say, I'm a supporter of Israel, and in some cases, in most cases, I even support Netanyahu. You guys called the man a war criminal, and these other groups call the man a war criminal, yet they haven't been able to produce any orders or where he's actually gone out and ordered the IDF to shoot children, kill children, and to bomb civilian areas. Now, would you, as what Hamas did, to plant yourself in a civilian population and shoot rockets in Israel and do things like that, you're going to have civilian casualties. And that is where the brilliance of Hamas has prevailed, because they knew by creating all of these civilian casualties that would tug at the heartstrings of people all over the world and would cause condemnation of the state of Israel. Now, they've let food in during that war. They've ordered people to get out of the way because the military is coming through. And why is it that the Palestinian people are the only people that aren't allowed to leave a war zone? The Egyptians won't let them in. None of the other countries will let them in. So to call the state of Israel a group of war criminals is simply not fair, and it's unjust. And if you believe, everybody that calls the state of Israel a war criminal, and help me out, Nate, because wait
a second. Let me explain something.
Okay.
You're misstating what I said. Netanyahu was indicted for the International Criminal Court for engaging in war crimes on 8 occasions between October 2023 until 20th of May of 2024. There were specific acts of misconduct that they documented to charge him for. That's not the country, Israel. That's an individual leader who led this effort to commit these crimes. They documented it, and you go to their website. It's on the International Criminal Court website. They document the crime and specific evidence of what he did wrong. So these acts of murdering the civilians would constitute war crime based on the definition.
Well,
then on top of that, Nathaniel, South Africa, as you remember, they put forth a case that had very specific charges, and other countries joined as well. And then there are a number of international organizations. So no, the dispute isn't with the state of Israel. It's with the Likud party. And it's not with Jewish people, our Jewish brothers and sisters. It's the actions of a very extremist society. So we got to be very clear there.
I didn't say Jewish people. I said the state of Israel and their leader. And by the way, that head prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, wasn't he just removed?
I mean,
but
this guy, that doesn't affect.
And here's one other thing I want to say to people that believe that they're war criminals. But here's something I never hear, Nate. And since you're an attorney who deals with death and all of that and compensation to people, if this man in the state of Israel and by extension the United States of America, if we're war criminals, then why aren't these people who say that Netanyahu's war criminal and the United States is the war criminal too, why aren't they asking for reparations for the Palestinian people? I mean, if you believe that, if my people were genocided, I would be asking for reparations and payments for all the unjust killings of my people. And I haven't heard that. I haven't heard not one person, Rashida Tlaib, Andre Carson, anybody that says that these people are guilty of war crimes or whatever, then darn it, advocate that the American people cut these people checks for reparations. If you believe that, you should be asking for reparations too. And I haven't heard it.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want to make something real clear that the evidence in this case, they document evidence of war criminal conduct on an individual. It's not a country being charged. It's an individual who they document evidence. Now, moving forward, let's go ahead, caller.
Hi, this is Renee. How are you doing today, everyone?
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Great. I'm glad you can hear me today. Pierre and I have had lots of conversations about the whole Bibi Palestine situation, so he knows how I feel, so I'm not going to make too much of a deal about it. But Bibi actually intentionally starved these people. He kicked out all the food organizations that were helping them. He blocked them in. He blew up hospitals. He blew up libraries. He blew up institutions. He blew up, he kicked all the journalists out. So basically, I'm not sure how that isn't a war crime, and nobody is talking about the Israeli state is a war criminals. They're talking about Bibi Netanyahu is a war criminal. So I'm going to leave that alone. As far as Mayor Mamdani is concerned, he did his due diligence. He went to his legal team, and they actually told him that legally he could not arrest Bibi because he doesn't have the authority to do so, but that Trump could if he wanted to. And that's my understanding of international law, but please educate me on the fact that if you have an international war crime warrant, that any state any country that honors that can actually lock you up and you're not immune to that. So that's the question I have, and then I'll wait to hear your answer.
I don't, it's outside of my practice area. I know Marlon Milton may be, but that's outside of what I do as a lawyer.
Okay, so I wasn't sure about that. I was reading up on that, but I'm not a lawyer, so I was wondering if that's the case, that if you have an international war crime warrant, that you can be arrested with no immunity. I know all of the regime and Hitler regime, all of those people were arrested except for Argentina because they had international war crime warrants as well. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and thank you for taking my call.
And the U.S. committed war crimes during World War II by intentionally bombing civilian facilities and not military facilities when they bombed the hell out of Japan. So it's who you are, whether you've committed a crime or not.
Yeah, well, it appears that the USA is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court. So that's a hurdle. But, since the U.S. does provide a substantial amount of aid, I think there have been some press reports of $3 billion a year and a lot of military support. Certainly, if they wanted to voice displeasure, I mean, they certainly could in terms of the behavior and things that are going on in the Middle East. And they could certainly express disfavor in terms of the violation of U.S. policy, which is a two-state solution. So I think what's happened, unfortunately, is that there have been sanctions, instituted, against those that were just doing their job on the international court. No evidence that I've seen these judges were biased or anything of that sort, but some of them have been sanctioned for just making a determination that there were war crimes. And I don't think that's appropriate either.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm against murder of anybody, anywhere. But the problem I'm seeing now is that our current president is openly advocating what would be a clear war crime, the posts on the internet. And I was looking at that, I was thinking to myself, does the typical American know that you can't just go out and start murdering people indiscriminately? People that have nothing to do with the government, military, and things like that, you're going to start murdering women and children who have nothing to do with it. It just doesn't make sense. And so I just hope that the average American who has common sense will recognize the fact that this is type of conduct that you would not want to see occurring. Like, what if the reverse occurred? That suddenly people in foreign countries start retaliating against Americans just based on what Trump is doing worldwide. How would you like a friend or neighbor or relative being murdered by somebody dropping a bomb in your neighborhood? You say, wait a second, I had nothing to do with this guy going out bombing civilians or killing people on boats, fishing boats. And so we will have very strong feelings against that. Well, it works both ways. The point is that you shouldn't use the mechanism of war to just start murdering people just because you could do it. Yeah. And that's what's important, is that human life is important. Every time you take a human being life, you not only affect that person, but you affect the relative and their support staff, all that. And so we can't just say, oh, this is war. No, it's not. There's boundaries. There's things that should not occur when you engage in war. And finally, speaking of our current war, it became a war without congressional authorization. And so we're spending billions of dollars each week on this war that we started. And now we're going to see the after effects of it. We see the Strait of Hormuz and the routes that these oil tankers take has been closed off. And so the collateral effect of that eventually is that we're going to see another big surge at some point in gasoline prices. It's got to occur because once the supply is diminished, the prices goes up. It's just kind of the way things are. So I'm anticipating, particularly when Milton land out there in California. I remember we were out there in February. I think gas price was over $6 a freaking gallon. Milton?
$6 a gallon?
Yeah, what's gas prices now in LA?
It's $5 and something a gallon, I do believe, Nathaniel. But yeah, that's the gas prices. You asked me to look at what's happening with Karen Bass. She's running into difficulties here lately. In the last couple of days, she's been headlining in the papers as the rise in homelessness has gone up a couple of percent points, which is thousands of people that she's been held responsible for. And now there's some lack of transparency in her text messaging with one of her employees that he went from a donator of 600 some thousand to working on her staff and in her campaign. So she's not on this clean slate that she was on a month ago. So that's my latest information on her, according to your request.
Yeah, but that sounds like opposition research being leaked to the press. That's what happened in our political world. And by the way, at Milton, for the record, there's nothing illegal by hiring a donor to work for you if you're elected official. Folks, that's what happens every day. I mean, people are real naive. If you don't hire donors, are you going to hire the people that voted against you and supported your opponent? Would you do that? No, if I was elected officials, I would hire people that I knew would have my interests in mind along with the citizen. You don't want people to come in and sabotage your operation. So I don't see anything wrong with that. because people that support you generally support you. And when you're in public eye, I mean, you could do 99 things right and have one mistake, and then that could lead to your downfall. We've seen a rapid escalation in these attacks on politicians like I've never seen before. Uh, it seems like we watched the congressman in California, in your state, Milton, that ran for governor, and all of a sudden he's been a congressman 12 years, whatever it was, and he runs for governor, and then out of woodwork, women start coming and say, "Oh, he assaulted me," and the same thing happened in Maine,
Right.
and so I think that a great deal of this emanates from opposition research. And when you run for political office, your whole life becomes like a glass container. You know, everything you've done all of a sudden is amplified, whether it's true or not. And so I remember one of the most famous hit jobs ever happened to Hillary Clinton. And that started this fiasco with Trump. Maybe most people didn't realize this, but I remember I used to get those daily poll numbers. We're up after the Planet Hollywood, we're up like 11, 12 points. And then Jim Coleman get on the news. Jim Coleman says that we're going to start an investigation into whether or not Hillary Clinton committed a crime with this server or email, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And she went from 12 points up to 2 points down in 48 hours. And the mantra of the Republican majority said, lock her up. And that was the most significant change in any election that I've known since I've been voting. We've never had such a dramatic shift in 48 hours in any election cycle like that. It was like a tidal wave hit. So these political hit jobs that we see, now the problem though that we're going to see this fall, we're going to see the largest amount of money spent on political campaigns ever is the prediction, right? So we got one guy who's a right-wing person who some people characterize as a racist, Elon Musk, who spends millions, if not billions of dollars on a campaign. And because of all the graft and corruption, there's going to be a lot of money out there to spend. And so what we're going to see, I predict this fall, is the most incredible, nasty campaigns that we've seen during our lifetime. I suspect that it's going to really get dirty politics this fall. And I think your Mayor Karen Bass is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, all these things all of a sudden become such a negative drag, and then people seize that and they forget about the totality of good works people are doing every day, out there sacrificing, and you putting your life, your health on the line for the good of others. And oftentimes it go unnoticed by many people. And I think that people out there today that are listening, you're going to be hearing all this negative publicity this fall, but stay focused on what has been going on, the rapid decline in our rights, the abnormal behavior of people running the government, the restriction on freedom of the press, the abuses in the military, the elimination of affirmative action, DEI, and things like that. And the list goes on, and just keep that in mind. So I want to make sure that our audience stay on track and not get sidetracked on these collateral deals. I was listening to Pierre when he was talking about Israel and things like that, and that misses the mark. We're talking about a single person that's a bad apple. We're talking about the United States. We talk about a person who leads the United States, who controls a massive amount of people that do whatever he wants done, whenever he wants it done.
Well said, Nick.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing too that we have to understand that we've seen this movie before. Before a lot of these election rules came into play, it used to be that the wealthiest in our society basically selected the president. You look at Rockefeller and some of the other titans of industry, they would get together in a room and decide, hey, who is going to be the leader? So That's why we have the Federal Elections Commission. That's why we had legislation to curtail that, to make sure that one person doesn't have an oversized influence. The one thing I would just say in closing to your audience, Nathaniel, is just to make sure that with all this spending the Supreme Court now has allowed, and they've even allowed coordination with the candidate, is that you have to find a reputable source of news, because you're going to get a lot of information out there that may not even be accurate. It's going to be Willie Horton on steroids. And we remember that campaign that happened presidentially that wasn't accurate. And I think you're going to see a lot of things like that. So it's important to, tune into Nathaniel's show and find other resources where you're going to get accurate information so that you're not bamboozled.
Hey, Milton Marlin, before Elon Musk, there was the Koch brothers who raised Charles and David Koch. I know what people realize, that they got all these corporations that we buy their goods, and they raised millions, if not billions of dollars for political campaigns to support certain agenda. And so meanwhile, the money that they're making these profit is based on them selling consumer goods to the very people that they're attacking. And so I remember when one of the brothers died, was it David that died back about 5-6 years ago? Yeah, David. And so even before Elon Musk, we had these billionaires that was infiltration of the election process. We've had some terrible rulings, Milton Marlin, from our Supreme Court as relate to contribution to political campaigns. Now you can destroy a person's life and reputation who run for political office by buying the election. Negative advertisement still has a profound effect on voter results. It still works. As much as we hate it, we could start a room about a person, and Milton was talking about the mayor of LA, and all of a sudden, what is permissible conduct, sounds like to me, it become a corrupt politician.
What the Koch brothers, some of the founders of the Heritage Foundation that started this project 25 some years ago, and they had a platform to retake America back from the liberals and the minorities, and they've implemented that platform, and as Marlon acknowledged earlier, they've succeeded pretty much at what they promised us they were going to do.
They started the Americans for Prosperity, state level. They had super PAC, think tanks. They control the Federalist Society, heavily invested in the federal judgeship and things like that. In their corporate agenda, basically what they've been doing is that it's been an abrogation of the rights of minorities. And we're seeing horrible results now, particularly in the areas of immigration. Here in our city, we had 35 Haitians arrested by ICE about 3-4 weeks ago. And as you recall, the Haitian had the temporary protected status. And then now, I think that injunction got overruled. Is that still pending, Marlon? Do you remember?
Yeah, so and it's particularly an issue in Ohio where there's a large Haitian American population. And so the administration is moving forward on that. I know there's been some litigation, and there may be some other alternative relief that can be sought. But, the Supreme Court's basically given the green light that temporary protected status, according to the majority opinion, is temporary. And the problem with that case is that you may recall from my prior commentary that the opposing argument was, hey, you have to make an assessment as to whether or not the facts on the ground in this foreign country, allow someone to live there safely and not be persecuted for a set number of reasons. And the administration didn't do that. And then also there was a claim that it was based upon discrimination, given the comments of the president calling these countries, S-hole countries and things of that sort. And all the other things that were said, and the Supreme Court just says, hey, that's still not evidence of discrimination, and allowed it to go forward. So, hopefully, Congress will put forth a legislative fix, because I know there's a number of business owners, particularly in Ohio, are concerned and wondering how they're going to fill those positions. But we'll have to stay tuned and see how things develop.
Hey, Mills, one final question. Is ICE very active in the LA area now?
I don't see any evidence of that. It seems to come up here and there, but I don't see it being that active here. I don't.
So nobody's been shot this week out in LA by ICE. That's a good week.
Nobody's been shot, but it still doesn't eliminate the fact that these people are not trained to deal with civilians with rights. Most of these ICE officers, they're not trained for this.
Well, next week, I want to cover the civil liability aspect of this. I'm going to conduct some research because this is such a new phenomenon. And I've not been made personally aware of the civil tort liability anybody has moved forward on. One of the limitations, as I recall, when you sue these federal agency, the right to jury trial in the Seventh Amendment was abrogated. So next week, I want to discuss that because ultimately, I predict that there's going to be more lawsuit involving ICE than any time in American history with all the things they're doing that are wrong. At some point in time, I think that we have to start holding these agencies and these agents accountable. And that's what we do. So let's table that to next week. And because there's got to be a lot of people out there that are adversely affected by ICE and their misconduct. And the same thing with Indianapolis, Milton, Marlin. In 2023, we were #1 in the United States. We had more black males shot and killed by police officers than any city in the country. We're #1, police murder. And so,
wow.
And that's something that we keep an eye on. But in any event, that ends our show for today. And so I'd like for the audience to join us next week as we tackle these tough issues, legal issues of the day. So thank you for calling in, audience. And continue to fight the good fight and make sure everybody get registered to vote and make sure they vote this fall.
Good night.
Yeah, bye-bye, everyone.